Let's continue our conversation, our series on the book of Exodus, the biblical Moses that Hollywood forgot. And when we look at where we were last week, we saw the covenant that we just discussed in our Torah portion this morning. We saw that covenant broken. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. This is the golden calf. Aaron builds a golden calf at the demand, not the request, the demand of the people. But Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow, even though we've built the calf today, tomorrow will be a feast to Jehovah, to the God who made the covenant with us. Perhaps since we've done this visible representation, we will now return back to our regularly scheduled programming and worship God, the one who brung us, right? Dance with the one who brung you is always a good slogan to keep with. So the next day, the Israelites rose early and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. These weren't to the Lord, however. These were to the representation of the Lord, the graven image, the calf. The people sat down to eat and to drink. We just saw festival offerings and sacrificial offerings and a festal meal between Moses and the elders and Aaron and his children up on the mountain in the presence of God. We saw the worship done right. Now we see the counterfeit. Same language, same idea, except that the people are doing this not with the God of Israel, the God who made the heavens and the earth, the God who brought them from Egypt, but this counterfeit God. And it tells us that they rose up to play. We watched two different video presentations last week of how Hollywood represented the children of Israel going up to play. This is a term of sexual activity that they rose up to do. So in an understated, straightforward way, the reader is to understand, not good. This is disaster. Let's see what happens. The Lord spoke to Moses, who is still in his presence up on Sinai. This is the children of Israel down there. Meanwhile, back up on the mountain. The covenant God spoke to Moses and said, go down at once. This is where we left it last week. Your people, not my people. Your people. It's like my wife, whenever Jonathan has done something that was unacceptable. Look what your son has done, right? Your son. Right? For your people, whom you, Moses, brought up from the land of Egypt. Remember how the Ten Commandments begin. I am the Lord your God who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Now it's Moses. God wants to put it all on him. He wants to disassociate himself from these people. They have corrupted themselves, and that's why he wants to disassociate themselves. They have quickly turned aside. And how? Quickly is right. Just a few chapters. Diane, where are you? What chapter did you read today? Were they all twice that you have said we will do?
Exodus
24. I'm only in 32 here. 32. 31. Have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made for themselves a molten calf and have worshipped it and have sacrificed to it and said with each action, the reader can feel the pain, the betrayal of God, the infidelity of this passage reeks to the heavens. The people of Israel have been an adulterous people to their God. They made for themselves. First mistake. You can't make God. But they've made for themselves a molten calf. They've worshipped it, and not me. They've sacrificed to it, and not me. And now they are attributing their deliverance from Egypt to it, and not me. This is the same God who led in those 10 commandments. I am a jealous God, and I will brook no rivals for my affections. You'd think that the Hebrews were listening. All that you say we will do and obey. We see what that commitment is worth. This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. So this is the anger of God. So angry that he disowns his people. They temporarily become Moses's. And look at what he's going to call them. The Lord said to Moses, I have seen. Now, God is so mad. It's not even your people anymore. It's not my people, it's not your. I've seen this people. Behold, they are an obstinate people. I prefer the old King James, stiff-necked. But obstinate will do. Now, then, therefore, let me alone. Let's have no conversation about this, Moses. Let me alone, that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them, and I will make of you a great nation. Do not attempt to intervene. Don't intercede on behalf of the people. I won't hear it. That's how. Do you ever get so angry with somebody that you say, I'm so angry with you, I cannot even look at you. You ever do that? I've done that. Maybe I'm dramatic. I don't know. But I do. I can't even look at you. I have to turn my face away to go to another room. Let me alone. Don't try to talk me out of it. Unless you want to. Don't try to intervene on behalf of this people unless you really love them. I want to argue on their behalf. I want to completely annihilate the nation. I want to start over with you. I'm not going to destroy Israel. Israel will continue. But through you and your project, I will make of you a great nation. Do you remember that phrase? In that phrase, we find the threat, but we also find the echo of the promise that indicates what Moses' next move is to be. That make of you a great nation is a direct quotation from the Abrahamic covenant. That was a promise that God made to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. One of those promises within the Abrahamic covenant, I will make of you a great nation, a numerous nation. And now God is directing that promise only to Moses. One problem with this is that God has already spoken regarding what is to be in the future of the 12 tribes of Jacob's children, Israel's children, progeny, the 12 sons of Abraham, right? The son Isaac, the grandson Jacob, and those great-grandchildren of Abraham, the 12 tribes. We already have prophetic word speaking of the future and promises. And one particular tribe has already gotten my attention in Genesis, and that's the tribe of Judah, from whenceforth the Messiah is to come forward. Not from Levi, not from the Levites, but from the tribe of Judah. So I read this, and perhaps I read this with the same understanding that Moses had regarding the Abrahamic covenant. I believe we have here a subtle cue for Moses to remember the promises that God has already made, and therefore intercede on behalf of Israel. So don't try to talk me out of it. Don't try to dissuade me. Right? That's what we have here. So Moses takes the cue and immediately appeals to God. Moses entreated Jehovah, covenant name, his God, and said, "Oh Jehovah, oh Lord, why does your anger burn against," watch these pronouns, the actions, all the pronouns. Why does your anger burn against your people, whom you have? It's a reminder. I didn't bring them out. They didn't come out by themselves. You brought them out. They're your people, whom you have brought out from the land of Egypt. It was no small thing either, with great power and with a mighty hand. The people are still your people. You wouldn't have exerted all that power. You wouldn't have gone to all that effort if you didn't love them, if you didn't have a unique relationship with them. Why should the Egyptians speak, saying with evil intent, he brought them out to kill them in the mountains? Think about your reputation. With evil intent, he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and to destroy them from the face of the earth. Turn, shuv, from your burning anger and change your mind about doing harm to your people. The Egyptians could not possibly respect a God who behaved in that sort of cruel, arbitrary, capricious fashion. And finally, remember your promises, Lord. It never hurts to remind God of the promises he's made, that he's committed himself to. Remember Abraham. Remember Isaac. Remember Israel, Jacob, your servants to whom you swore by yourself. Now, that didn't swear with nobody else present, but swore on himself because there was no other greater force or personage by whom God could commit himself than himself. God swore by himself, the greatest power in the universe. You made a promise, you swore by yourself. That's the guarantee of all guarantees. That's the commitment of all commitments. It said to them, I'll multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven, and all this land which I have spoken, I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. You will remember, going back throughout Exodus, throughout Moses' relationship with God from the burning bush onward, Jehovah has always taken great pains to emphasize his identity as the promise-keeping God, the God who remembers his covenants. He's not a promise breaker, not a capricious adjuster of covenants as he wants to, when he wants to. When God says something and commits himself to it, you can take that to the bank. So the Lord changed his mind. The Lord repented. He turned from one direction to another about the harm which he said he would do to his people. This is an excellent reminder for us that while the Lord's character is unchanging, he is responsive to prayer. If God was not responsive to prayer, why should we bother to pray? It is an exercise in futility. Why would we bother to? Why would Moses bother to intercede with God if there was no chance that his argument could win the day? That God might indeed be influenced by Moses' intercession. Right? God is responsive to prayer. He's open to amending even a divinely announced course of action. Of course, that's always dependent on circumstance. And this one was is a fairly safe one, because we already have it written in the text that God had committed himself already to the people of Israel and to the tribes, not just to Levi, but to the tribes. So, Moses turned, having rescued his people, and that's what he's done. That's what this text presents Moses as. Moses is the hero of his people. Right now, the unseen, unsung hero of his people, who, while they're playing down at the foot of Sinai, Moses is on his face before the Lord, interceding on their behalf. And now, having rescued his people from the dire consequences of God's wrath, Moses, he has his own wrath. Right? He's assuaged God, but now Moses takes up the offense. And he descends the mountain to confront his people with his own fury. And this time carrying with him the 2 tablets. Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. Tablets written on both sides. They were written on one side and then the other. God himself carved out these stone tablets and engraved them with his finger. We talked about this last week. The actual dimensions of the tablets, how they actually might have looked. And in every one of our films, from the silent original 10 Commandments, which just literally has one letter to stand for each one of these commandments, or the big remake where we have these giant stone tablets, to this one where there's a giant stone tablets, will work for food. I don't know what they're doing in this particular image. Or this guy here. I mean, those are some significant tablets. The tablets, they couldn't have been any larger than, let's say 2 feet by maybe 1 foot, 1.5 feet. I mean, that's the largest, because they had to fit. First of all, they had to be carryable up and down a mountain, or down a mountain. But they had to fit within the Ark of the Covenant, which is not, it's not a Cadillac. It's the Ark of the Covenant, not the Cadillac. And so those tablets could not have been as large as that. And you'll remember that the tablets were written on double-sided. And again, the way tablets were written in that time and culture, we have records like this. They're double-sided, and often the reason you have 2 tablets is you have one and a copy. So it's not like parts 1 through 5, laws 1 through 5, commandments 1 through 5 on this tablet, commandments 6 through 10 on this one. You have all 10 front and back, and then you have all 10 front and back, okay? The set and then the copy. The tablets were God's work, and the writing was God's writing, engraved on the tablets. Now when Joshua, that's Moses' assistant, his aide-de-camp, When Joshua heard the sound of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there is a sound of war in the camp. This is if Joshua, halfway up the mountain, hears the cries, the noise of the people, imagine how loud, imagine how raucous, perhaps even how debauched they may have been for Joshua halfway up that mountain as the sound travels up, for him to mistake that with the sound of war in the camp. This was some enthusiastic praise and offering going on. And Moses said, no, it's not war that you're hearing, not the sound of the cry of triumph, nor is it the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear. The hills are alive with the sound of idolatrous music. But Moses, he's no Julie Andrews. And it came about as soon as Moses came near the camp, and he saw the calf and the dancing, that Moses' anger burned. His turn now. Remember, Moses is recorded throughout the narrative. He has a bit of a temper himself, right? He's not the most even-keeled of individuals as well. So much so that he killed an Egyptian who was attacking a fellow Hebrew. So much so that he was so aggravated by the Israelites that he hits the stone twice for water to come out. Such was Moses' temper, that it shamed the Lord in front of the people, and therefore Moses would not be able to enter into the promised land, would only be able to view it from a distance, from Mount Nebo. Right? But nonetheless, so Moses, he's no cardboard cutout. He's a real individual. And you see, even in this autobiographical account, Moses gives you himself, warts and all, the good, the bad, the ugly. Moses' anger burned. He sees the people, he sees this gross violation of the covenant, and he is offended. And he graphically illustrates for his people that the Mosaic covenant had been broken by them. And he hurled the two tablets, carved by God, written by his finger, carried all the way lovingly down the mountain. He threw the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. Then what he does, it's interesting, and we'll compare and contrast Hollywood's version. He hurls those two tablets, and then he destroys the golden calf, and after burning it, he melts down the gold and consumes the underlying wood form. In the fire, he takes what remains of the idol and grinds it to powder. Let's see what happens. Here's Hollywood's version, and then we'll look at the text. Lights, please. All right, let's have the lights. Now, growing up, I always thought that's what was in the text. That was pretty impressive. Those words, that dramatic action, those who will not live by the law shall die by it. And he tosses it, so dramatic, and the earth opens, and not to be found in the passage. Actually, this conflates two different passages. Who knows where the passage where the ground does indeed open up and Dathan and the rebels and Korah are swallowed up? Numbers 18. Yes, right. So it's the conflation of two different events. Let's see what the text actually says. He takes the calf which they had made, and he burns it, he melts it down, grinds it to powder, and scattered it over the surface of the water, and made the sons of Israel drink it. So they allude to that in the text, but they don't actually go there. You will be made to drink bitter waters, right? But they don't actually show that. This is what actually happens in the text. And Moses, now having forced the rebels to drink the mixture, why would he do that? This was an abject lesson in the utter folly of what Israel had done. See, they had been worried. Remember, why did they build the calf to begin with? They were worried as to what would happen to them if Moses did not return. Rather, they should have been worried about what's going to happen if Moses does return and find them engaged in this kind of idolatry. Not a very powerful God who allow himself to be melted down, ground up, mixed with water like chocolate quick, and imbibed by his worshipers, and then subsequently evacuated from their bodies. This is your God. Pretty good lesson. But now his next action is to investigate how in the world did this happen? How could this have happened? And so he went to his brother Aaron. You remember, we saw in the text this morning, he had entrusted Aaron with the leadership of the people in his action, and not believing that Aaron would allow this without some kind of level of threat or of coercion, he asks his brother to explain himself. Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them? What threat did they threaten you with? Physical force? What was the issue?" Aaron gives three excuses for the creation of the golden calf. Excuse number one was the Israelites are bad people. We'll see this in the text. Excuse number two, so it's their fault, in other words. Pass the buck. They made me do it. Moses was gone too long. It's your fault. Excuse number one, it's their fault. They're evil. Excuse number two, it's your fault. You're late. Excuse number three, it was a miracle. I put all the gold in it, out popped this golden calf. It's the most amazing thing I ever saw. By the way, just FYI, that little golden calf there, that is the original prop from the Ten Commandments, not the big thing that falls down into the pit, but the little 10-inch version that they carried around with them to make that golden calf. Remember for that little golden calf sat on, made of wood, covered with gold, was paint, gold paint, sat on C.B. DeMille's desk for years until he passed away. And then was auctioned off. I don't know who owned it between then and now. The C.B. DeMille estate, maybe, I don't know. But it was auctioned off in 2012. And you'll be interested to know that that little 10-inch golden calf went for $34,000 at auction, plus California tax. So, anyway, I don't know who's going to be caught with a golden calf on it, but anyway, that was a little extra piece of trivia thrown in for nothing, no extra charge. Not $34,000, not tax, nothing. Let's see what the text says. Aaron said, "Do not let the anger of my Lord burn." Remember who Aaron is. He's his older brother. You know the people yourself. They are prone to evil. So number one, the people are evil. They're responsible. They said to me, "Make a god for us who will go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." You were late. And I said to them, "Whoever has any gold, let them tear it off." So they gave it to me. And I took the gold and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. It's an extraordinary passage. There are some who say, well, the language here is that of metallurgy, and so he's actually saying yes. So we put it in, and yes, the calf came out. It's what to be expected. It was melted and formed that way, but I like my little miraculous out came this calf much better. When Moses saw that the people were out of control, he saw the utter anarchy of the camp, and he moves to punish the guilty party. Aaron had, by the way, Moses makes sure that everybody knows for all time, it was Aaron who let them get out of control to be a derision among their enemies. This is not something they're going to keep quiet. This is something that is publicly done, that shames the people of God publicly, that shames the God of the people publicly. Aaron had let them get out of control to be a derision among their enemies. And Moses stood at the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, for Jehovah, come to me." Just like in the movie. That was good. Whoever is for the Lord, who's on the Lord's side, come to me. And all the sons of Levi, his own tribe, the Levites, they are the ones who respond to his invitation. They come together to him. And he said to them, "Thus says Jehovah," covenant name, "the God of Israel. Every man of you put his sword upon his thigh and go back and forth from gate to gate in the camp, from one end to the other, and kill every man his brother, and every man his friend, and every man his neighbor." Every major participant in the rebellion are to be destroyed. You see, when you have cancer in the body, it must be excised, or it will spread and destroy the entire system. You have a rotten apple in the barrel, it will contaminate the rot and poison the whole barrel. And so kill every man his brother, every man his neighbor, every man. So the sons of Levi, Moses' tribe, did as Moses instructed. And about 3,000 of the people fell that day. The text, just look at that text. It's so pointed. It's very Jack Webbian. Facts, just the facts. It doesn't convey the difficulty, the emotional impact of Jews killing Jews, of Israelites killing Israelites, of civil insurrection and punishment. This TV version of the Ten Commandments is like the only one that I've seen that really conveys the power. Let's dim the lights and let's see the power of this insurrection. It's very important. It's very important that the impact of 3,000 Israelites killed by other Israelites is felt by the reader and is not just quickly passed over. It's not just a statistic. These are Israelites who were slaves. These are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are Israelites who were passed over. The firstborn was passed over in Egypt. These were Israelites who marched out with Moses, who crossed through the Red Sea, but who somehow by the time they got to Sinai, had lost their way. That is why, by the way, it is such a powerful statement to read in Acts chapter 2, when the Spirit of God comes at Pentecost, the commemoration of the giving of the law at Sinai. When Peter finishes his sermon, 3,000 Jews find eternal life that day. That number is not just a statistic. It's a heavy number for those who are familiar with what that holiday celebrates. The giving of the law, followed by the giving of the Spirit. The sequel, 3,000 died because they broke the covenant. 3,000 Jews found life in the new covenant. Well, Moses, the next day, says, dedicate yourselves today to the Lord. For every man has been against his son and against his brother, in order that he, Jehovah, God, may bestow a blessing upon you today. I love that clip because you see Moses' sister, the shame, she's a great actress, shame on her face, the shame on Aaron's face, the shame on the people's face, the rebellion on the other, all the way to the end. Well, the next day Moses said to the people, you yourselves have committed a great sin, and now I am going up to the Lord. A great sin is technical language for you have been adulterous against your God. You have been unfaithful to your God. You've committed a great sin. So now I'm going up to Jehovah. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. I'm going to ascend Mount Sinai on your behalf. God's divine judgment may only be at the inaugural stage. Moses wants to lessen the severity of God's holy wrath. Remember, all Moses was able to do was keep God from wiping out the people in total. Now that the rebels have paid, Moses wants to see if he can make it right. He plans, look at this, perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. Don't miss that. Moses plans to offer his own life on behalf of his people to make an atonement for them, because desperate times call for desperate measures. And Moses returned to the Lord and said, alas, this people have committed a great sin, same phrase, and they have made a god of gold for themselves. But now, if you will, forgive their sin, and if not, blot me out from your book which you have written. Moses formally confesses Israel's sin and begs for forgiveness. And in this passionate plea for mercy, Moses made his own premature death the condition for God's destruction of the nation, praying that the Lord refuses to extend forgiveness. Moses is to be written out of the book of life. See this book of life, of course, we see this in part of the theology of the Day of Atonement and Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, New Year. And in Psalm 69, may they be blotted out of the book of life. May they not be recorded of the righteous. The idea is that God has a book in which he writes the names of those who live. The Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. But go now, lead the people where I told you, behold, my angel, not the angel of the Lord, not the angel of God, now, not the angel who has the power to forgive sin that we saw before. Now it's just an angel. An angel. My angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I punish, I will punish them for their sin. I'm not done yet. Moses, I refuse your offer of substitutionary atonement. Divine judgment, I'm not going to annihilate them, okay. But divine judgment will not be forestalled for the guilty. Their sin is going to be punished. And the Lord smote the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron had made. Some say, well, this verse is out of order, and he's talking about the 3,000 who died. No, I think while Moses is up there, God smote more of his people because of what they did, to teach them a lesson. Well, we'll leave it there. What's to happen to the Israelites? What's to happen because of their sin? They very clearly had violated their covenant with God. They not only violated, they broke it, symbolized by the shattering of the tablets. And death is the appropriate response for that level of rebellion. Those who want to be under Torah today, read this passage carefully and learn it well. We are not under that covenant which has death as the appropriate response for violation. We are under a new covenant. A new covenant paid for not by the blood of bulls or goats or calves or sheep, but by the blood of our Messiah. That if we sin, and when we sin, when we act inconsistently with our natures as children of the Lord, we can quickly ask forgiveness, and forgiveness is granted. And reconciliation with our God is always available and on tap. Why? Because our Messiah, through his blood, his shed blood, has instituted a new covenant where God's laws are within us. And the Spirit of God dwells in us. And our Messiah is ever with us through his Spirit. And forgiveness is but a request away, because he, our Messiah, is also our great high priest. Not a priest like Aaron. How'd you like to have a high priest like that? A high priest who, right even before he became the high priest, his claim to fame, making a golden calf, resulting in the deaths of thousands of Israelites. Our high priest is not imperfect. Our high priest is not a sinner. Our high priest is the perfect, sinless Son of God. Yeshua HaMashiach, our Messiah, who came, condescended to live as a human being, lived a perfect life, and died an ignoble, humiliating, degrading, insufferable death. He took our punishment upon himself, so that forgiveness is always available. This is the freedom that our Messiah brings. We are free, free indeed, free at last, free indeed, Our Messiah makes us free. What are we free for? To serve Him.